Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 13th, 2024 Development Review Commission hearing. The Development Review Commission is created to hold public meetings and hearings to provide analysis and recommendations to the City Council regarding general land use policies and applications where the Commission has recommendatory power, and to render final decisions on specified applications where the Commission has final decision-making power, including but not limited to all aspects of a proposed and future development. The Development Review Commission recognizes that the creation of a desirable environment throughout the city for residents, businesses, and industry is a prime requisite for the interdependence of land values, aesthetics, and good site planning by promoting harmonious, safe, attractive, and compatible development that is therefore considered to be in the best interest of public health, safety, and general welfare. Any person aggrieved by a final decision of the Development Review Commission may file an appeal to the City Council within 14 calendar days after the Development Review Commission has rendered its decision. Development Review Commission recommendations to the City Council are not final decisions. Tonight with us from staff, we have Jeff Tamilevich, Ryan Levake, Michelle Dalkey, Jacob Payne, Joanna Berry, and Jason Wolf. And tonight on the commission, on my right, Commissioner Larry Tom, Commissioner Charles Redmond, Vice Chair Michelle Schwartz. On my left, Joe Forte, Commissioner Robert Miller, and Commissioner Barbara Lloyd. Okay, tonight on our agenda, I'll run through the agenda real quick. We have items number 1 and 2 for the meeting minutes from our study session on January 23rd, 2024. We have one item, the Svoboda residence, item number 3, and then item number 4 is the College and 7th Avenue mixed use. Item number 3, during our study session, we decided to put that on our consent agenda. Our consent agenda will be voted on and the item will not be heard. However, if there's somebody in the audience tonight or a member of the public who would like to speak on that item, please get my attention now and we can pull that from the consent agenda. Okay, seeing none, we will have that on our consent agenda. Item number 4, we will hear. And then we have commissioner and city staff announcements to round out the meeting tonight. So to start off, is there, I'd like to hear a proposal for the items number 1 and 2 for the study session and regular meeting minutes for January 23rd, 2024. Commissioner Tom?
I move to approve the meeting minutes from study session 1/23/24 and the regular meeting minutes from 1/23/24.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Lloyd is second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and that passes with 2 abstaining.
Yes.
Commissioner Redmond and Commissioner Miller are abstaining. They were not present at that meeting and did not wish to vote on that tonight. Okay, and now I would like to hear a motion for the consent agenda. Next item. Commissioner Tom?
Move to approve the consent agenda for February 13th.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Miller. All those in favor, raise your hand. Excellent. So that passes unanimously. All right, moving right along. Item number 4, College and 7th mixed use. Can we have, I believe we start with member staff, right? Okay, we'll start with Ms. Vaz tonight, representing the applicant.
I'm gonna bring this down. That'll be better. Good morning. Oh, good evening, sorry. Good morning.
Good evening.
Morning.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's morning. For your record, members, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Manjula Vaz, the law firm of Gamage and Burnham. I am here today to talk to you about college and 7th mixed use. I will give a brief presentation. We'd like to talk a little bit about the project. And then, as Commissioner Tom recognized, and we talked a little bit about, we would like to talk a little bit about parking and kind of our thoughts about parking in this location and kind of what we're doing here. But we are very excited to bring this. We think it's a beautiful project, and one thing that we've spent a lot of time working with our neighbors at ASU and the city, and we appreciate everything that Chris before, and then Jacob, Jeff, and Ryan have done to kind of work us through this project. I think it's made the project a lot better. Everybody on all the sides in terms of design. You know, we have maybe a little philosophical issue on parking, but other than that, I think we all agree this is a great project moving forward. So I'll just quickly go. I think we're all aware of the site and kind of the location, 7th and College, Student Book Center, College Street, across from Fulton. So the application today is for a planned area development overlay for the development standards, and then a DPR for the development's design, site, and landscape. The site, in terms of the general plan, is mixed use, and I think we see that. And then it has a 2040 high density urban core designation, and it matches similarly in the 2050 plan that's going on the ballot. So the building itself is a 13-story mixed-use building. We have 208 multifamily residential units, mixtures of studios, 1, 2s, and 3s. And the thing that's really, that we spend a lot of time talking about, we'll talk about it, is basically the street level retail frontage. And we have over 8,000 square feet of retail. And the reason we tried to, I mean, we've all talked about it. Commissioner Millen and I have had a lot of little conversations about the parking and trying to make street level retail, trying to make College, I mean, our office is on that street, trying to make College pop, you know, in terms of how does that retail work. And so we didn't want to put more parking in terms of putting more parking in the parking garage. And as I don't know, somebody said, we go above one level. We very purposely we have one level. We originally tried to go 2. We did submit plans with 2. It is expensive. And so, but we are committed to try to keep all of our parking underground. And frankly, we have to plan this building for now and in the future. And the future, when we started this, you know, is a building that is very close to light rail, is very close to Orbit. It's close to the streetcar, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But it's really about the front of this building and how you'll see the design. We want it to match kind of where Postino and Snooze does to try to invite more activity on the streets and have the retail. The other thing you'll see and also is we have resident amenities. We've tried to break it up a little bit with the Trinitas building that's to our west, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We have substantial landscape enhancements. We do have 38 on-site parking spaces. We have 2 car share spaces that equate to basically, I don't know if Don's here yet, but Don will come talk to you. Don Cartier will come talk about, you know, that equate to 24 car vehicles being there, having ability for the people who live here, 6 EV spaces and a compact space within our parking garage. And then I'm gonna show you, we have 9 on-street vehicle parking spaces along 7th Street. That's mainly for the retail, and then 4 on-street loading spaces, both for Uber pickup and then on-street loading. So here we can kind of see, by doing the parking provided below grade, we've reduced the building height to try to provide an appropriate transition and scale along College Avenue. The buildings to our west, I think Trinitas is, I don't know where it ended up, but I think it's gonna end up like 26, so we're trying to kind of provide that transition realm with Fulton and the other buildings around there. We are trying to do it, as I said, an improved streetscape experience and having meaningful conduction at the pedestrian realm. We're also like reaching out to higher end restaurants. So, you know, it takes both, you have to have the right ambiance to attract the right types of restaurants. And so that is really what we're trying to do, to try to bring other restaurants back into downtown. And we have spent a lot of time, and as we've talked about kind of on the architectural design, that doesn't show all the parking levels that you already see in downtown. Here's Don, who's gonna talk about parking with me in a bit. So again, just to show you a little bit about, you can see the on-street parking at 7th Street to the north, and then where we have our on-site street loading spaces. And then you can see kind of the outdoor dining patios that are fronting along College, and then kind of and we'll show you more in detail in terms of the landscape enhancements on the 2nd floor courtyard, and then the 13th floor pool deck that kind of faces College. But it also has other amenities. Again, this is the kind of the below grade parking plan, which you can see the car share, EV ready, And then the level P1 parking, we have kind of entrance off the alley. Oops, there you go. And then street level floor plan, again, just a big retail restaurant that will be activated along College, and that has been our main point along College. Then we have the leasing, bike room, trash and recycling, and then the parking garage entrance. And then you can see workrooms and kind of the layout of the residential units. And then high amenitized 13th floor in terms of lounges, yoga studios, kind of a basketball court, fitness center. So try to encourage, have a very high amenitized building to encourage people who want to live in this type of environment. So I'm going to have our architects just talk a little bit briefly about architecture, just to give you a sense of where they came from in trying to design this building. We spent a lot of time about it, so I'm going to butt real quick. Bob, do you want to?
Thank you.
Just
My
name
name
and
is Robert Thompson. I'm architect, TVA Architects out of Portland, Oregon. We do lots of multifamily housing projects, and we're really excited to be representing Aaron Fields on this project and that.
Sir, can you slide a little bit closer to the microphone for me?
Okay.
Either one, thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, one of the things that we looked at on this project overall was kind of like three primary things. There's like the context of the site, the scale of the buildings that we were looking at when we were designing this, and then the issue of compatibility. And one of the things that we really looked at is this kind of relationship between the university and between the city of Tempe, and kind of how we scale these buildings down. I mean, we showed up here early this morning, and I got to admit, just amazed at the number of people, number of young students walking down College Avenue. I mean, just the energy and the excitement of that was really, really great. So for us, we're looking at a lot of the new buildings that are being built in Tempe that are 20, 25-story tall buildings, and then we look at the university, and that's, let's say, 5 and 6 stories in that range. So a lot of the design that drove that was like, what is that scale, in terms of when you think about that many people using the street and activating College, how do we step that down in a way where there's this kind of coexistence between City of Tempe University, and creating a really, really nice human scale in terms of how people use university. And so the building that we're looking at, one of the things that we wanted to do was do a building that was very simple, understated, elegant, and a building that's really more a part of the fabric, not a building that was trying to scream and make a great big statement. It's one that kind of coexists between kind of the nice textural brick and masonry buildings of the university, and at the same time, reinforcing the new architecture and everything that's going on in the city of Tempe. So one of the things that we were looking at from a material standpoint is, looking at a lot of the new buildings that are going up, there's lots of composite metals with lots of really warm colors in that. Oh, we can move through this. Our kind of not a compromise, but a way to deal with that was really looking at the idea of using a blend of brick, like 2 or 3 blends of brick. So it's very warm, very elegant, and it has a vibrance to it and energy to it and that. So as you can see in the elevation looking straight at the building, again, it's a very simple gridded building, 11 stories. Of apartments through the midsection of the building, and kind of looking at the building as where we create a very strong base, with a retail portion of that, a midsection or body to the building where the housing was, and then on the top where we have our amenity floor, that being the cap to the building and that. And we kind of deliberately moved the amenity floor back so that it has less of an impact when you're viewing it off of University, kind of keep the scale of the building down. So let's see how this works.
Here, let me have it help here. I'll just,
Okay. Yeah, so this is a view looking at the building with 7th on the right and then College Street on the left. And then again, looking at the new building that's being proposed on the west side of our project there. So it kind of gives you this sense of how the building's kind of stepping and scaling. And like we were talking about the issue of parking, one of the things that we like to do is really do everything we can do to activate the street, the pedestrian experience, bring light, energy, and vibrance to the street. So the idea that Mr. Fields had about lowering the parking underground so that we could bring the housing units all the way down and basically cap the retail, so we could really, really add to the activation energy of College was really important to the project. So here you can see, again, On the right side of the building on 7th there, what we're looking at is our leasing office, main entry of the building for the lobby, and then, again, all down College Street, we have just under 8,400 square feet of prime retail space for that.
I was trying to find a better view.
Yeah. So, and then this is a quick view looking at it from the, what would that be, the southeast?
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
northwest.
Yeah, northwest. Again, it kind of gives you that sense of the base. This is the alley off to the left side there, so you get the base, midsection, and top. We did a rendering that showed the building at night. I think that's the next one in there. Kind of gives you a sense of how we were looking to highly light the retail experience along College there. One of the things we're looking at too, with the new building that's proposed to the west of this now, we're actually looking at pushing a portion of this building back so we don't deal with a really deep well, so we can open that inner courtyard area back out, get some natural light, fresh air in there, which seems really important to the project. And this is a view looking in. The new building is going to be coming up or butting into the back of this, but this kind of gives you a sense of the scale of that courtyard and that. We're kind of looking at providing some kind of whimsical framework in that brings color and a little animation to the space within the courtyard itself. This is a view looking at it on College. You know, we've got 30 feet about from the face of the building out to the curb, so just a huge opportunity to do some really nice pedestrian-oriented and retail-oriented spaces there in terms of how they coexist together. So one of the things we're looking to, again, like I was saying before, we want to keep the building pretty simple, understated, and elegant. One of the things that we're looking at to put shadow in contrast to the building is actually, we do this quite a bit, where we actually grouping the windows of the units in groups of 4 like this, and then doing kind of an extruded frame around the units. So that's sticking out about 8 inches right now, which gives the building a lot of texture because you're always moving perpendicular to the building. So the way the light plays off of those and adds a lot of drama and depth, we think adds a lot to the project. And then this is just a sample of the material.
So, thanks.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So just briefly, just to highlight some of the sustainability aspects that we've talked about before in terms of landscaping and the appliances, electric vehicles. Then we've talked about on-site car share, on-site loading, and bicycle parking exceeding the code requirement. So as we talked about, we have very little parking here. We think that this is a building for the future. As I said to the mayor the other day, and I think I said to you, and Commissioner Miller said to me, like, we have to start planning for the future. And we're not, there are many cities that are starting with, eliminating parking requirements in the downtown. That helps with both affordability for people, affordability for these buildings. It helps with some sustainability because in the future, you're going to start seeing, hopefully, less and less parking garages attached to buildings. And we need to start thinking about parking, as I said the other day, in a different way, in that a parking doesn't belong to a building, and parking maybe need to belong to an area, especially the downtown, and think about how to do some shared parking models. Now, we can't do that right now because we don't have shared parking, but here we do have lots of buildings with lots of parking, and this is a building where we can start trying to say, here's a building, you come, we don't have parking, we have some parking for you, and you can bring a car, and probably don't need a car. You don't need a car to live here. You're, I don't know, whatever, 2.5 blocks away from the light rail. You're two blocks away from the streetcar. You have Orbit. This is one of the few places where you can live that lifestyle, if that's what you want to do. So I'm going to have Dawn talk a little bit about kind of her thoughts in terms of the CivTech. We're happy to talk. Happy to have a longer conversation about it in terms of what we're thinking about in terms of how you live, but the lack, the kind of the design of the building, and this building is not about parking, it was designed about people and about retail, and that's where this building started. So I'm gonna have Dawn talk a little bit about her report, and then happy to chat about my parking, because I want to remove the condition that Commissioner Tom brought up.
Hi, good evening. I'm Dawn Cartier with CivTech, and I think the best way to start talking about parking overall is the idea that in the last 10 years, it's made a significant shift And as Manjula brought up, if you're thinking about the future in the next 10 years, parking is going to dramatically change. And the primary reasons are just the ability to have a Waymo, an Uber at the tip of your fingers. We're all using it. My grandparents are using it. I mean, this has become an accessible transportation mode, which what we're seeing on my side of the industry is empty parking lots, less parking lots, especially when we know that we've got other transportation modes. And our study looked at areas, because this is a forward-thinking development, our study looked at the other areas in the country that have already had a shift in their modeling, a shift in their way of thinking. Tempe in Arizona is the only place where I shouldn't say the only place, it's the only place in the Metro Phoenix and the Metroplex where we've got a streetcar. So not only do we have our rubber-tired buses and our light rail, we're starting to think mobility in smaller increments. How do we connect to that mobility and make mobility connect to more mobility? And this is exactly how other cities that have gone to zero parking requirements started. So it beckons the discussion of where are we headed. You know, not in a 20-year time frame. Where are we headed in a shorter time frame? And what is the life of buildings that we're looking at today? And how are we thinking about how parking is going to work? Some of the interesting things, as we did some research that we found, is in developments where they offer car sharing and participants in car sharing, car ownership went down by 67%. It was about a 0.8 per car per household, an original value pre car sharing. This will offer 2 car shared spots. Parking after that car sharing experience went down, or vehicle ownership after that went down to 0.27 per residence, not per person, per residence. So those are trends. That is a 2010 trend. That is not a 2024 trend. So these are things that have been being experienced elsewhere for long periods of time. It's awesome that we're just starting to see them here. So in consideration of everything we have here with our vehicle spaces, our multi-modes of transportation, the fact that we've got a car sharing element we know already gives people transportation options and where we think things are headed, what we've concluded is that we're providing some parking here. And even in a zero parking requirement, which I think at this point, looking at the location of where we sit, I think I'm at a spot, and this has taken me a while to get to, where we could truly move forward and say, I think we've got some spots in Tempe that could support a zero parking requirement. I don't think I could have said that standing here 5 years ago, but today, watching Waymo drive around, I am pretty certain that this is the direction that everything will be heading. And I love, Manjula, that you brought up the idea of shared, not attaching parking anymore to the land use, attaching parking to the area. What's happening in the area? What do we need to do to support the area? And then from there, rethinking now how our modes of transportation work. I am here to answer any specific questions as it relates to parking. We've done quite a few studies in the area post this or pre this and tables, and I'm sure you've seen those studies. So happy to answer questions you might have.
Yeah, and just to end my conversation, then we're happy to chat. What we would like, we appreciate staff's, we had a lot of the conditions are just a little bit of a conversation we had. There was, between Chris and Jacob, we had some miscommunication probably on my part in terms of what conditions should be there. They were using a template and whatever. So some of that, most of that is just boilerplate changes in terms of they don't need to be there, they're not required. In terms of the condition that we'd like approved is this one in terms of adding an extra level of parking. We're happy to collect the information for the staff to the condition Commissioner Tom brought up. You know, certainly if we're going to ask permission to do this, we would like to be part of the future of the city and give them the information that we get from our building to help them, you know, as everybody makes decisions on what's happening in downtown. So with that, I think Dawn's not going. Am I coming, Dawn? We're good. I'm going to make Dawn stay because I know you want to talk to her too. Happy to chat and answer any questions.
Thank you.
I don't know if Jacob's going to make a presentation first.
Commissioner Lloyd has a question, I believe.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you. It is for Dawn.
Oh, Dawn,
Yeah.
see?
Well, she said I'm here for questions, so
Dawn's here for all sorts of questions.
I really am here for all sorts of questions.
I'm just curious what kind of study was done in terms of if there is a burden on the lower parking, what options are available to this property if it turns out there's more demand than was planned for?
Yeah, we didn't do an analysis of surrounding area parking, but there are options, and again, as a team, I think we would have to discuss how we would want to do them, but I would tell you the first place I would start is by, if we find that we've got more residents moving in who have parking and they're saying they're parking off-site, even though that's not the ideal resident for this location. And the option that we would have is by converting more regular parking to shared parking and doing more shared vehicles for the site itself. You know, for every site, every shared spot vehicle shared spot we have, so every shared vehicle we have, it replaces 13 vehicles. So just that alone would completely eliminate our need for parking for an individual resident.
Commissioner Redmond?
This is a follow-up to Commissioner Lloyd's comment, and I'm not sure which of it's for. I'm very supportive of what you're doing and have been saying for a long time, we're building too much parking. However, we've already built too much parking. And to me, if I were thinking of a solution rather than the second underground story, which I think brings the number to something quite interesting, is some sort of agreement with Olive or with Atmosphere. They know what they have. They could commit 100 spaces, you know, at a retail level or something, and that becomes part of your offer to your tenants, that, you know, either you get into our elegant 37 spaces, or you can just walk 200 feet and get into one of their 150 empty spaces. I don't know. You could really be breaking the ground on that because you're in a real situation where there are buildings with parking and you're just building.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Redmond, that's a good point, and I agree with you. And I think, you know, given the fact that, as you know, I think they're called Stratosphere, but the building to our west is building, I think, 7 levels of parking or something. I mean, which I'm sure they're not going to need. They have a pretty high parking number. It's not built, but if something, you know, our first plan is we're going to tell our residents, we don't have parking spaces. And Aaron Fields, who's a developer, is built in LA, you know, built in Portland, Seattle, and all these places where they built them without any parking, he hasn't any problems. You know, much like when we started the cul-de-sac on Apache, if you want a building with parking, there's a million buildings with parking. It's not like this is the only one. You can live in Atmosphere and come visit our restaurants. Because really what we would like to do is have you come visit our restaurants, make sure they're successful. But if you do want to live here and you need parking and for some reason you need it, you're right. Like, there's parking options and we can cut it. You can park here. You can park at the Union. There are other places to park in downtown if you want to pay for parking, because you're never going to get parking here for free. So you can park wherever you want, not, you know, in the Union or wherever if you need to bring a car. But we will be dissuading people from bringing cars. And this is a good location because it's not surrounded by neighborhoods, so you're not, you know, we necessarily bothering people.
Commissioner Tom?
What is the proposed parking ratio now? Do you guys have that number?
I believe,
Is that the .094?
yes. Okay. How come-
.094 for each bedroom, and then
I can.
Yeah, I don't know. Greg, or Jason, my thing won't work anymore. Do what?
Is it turned on the right?
Oh,
Oh, you know what? I think it froze.
oh. One moment, we have this. I do think it's 0.1. I think it's .094.
.094? Okay.
That's what we have in here. Trying to find it in the tape.
Okay, can we kind of go back the other way? Keep going. One more. There you go. Yep, there you go.
Okay. That makes sense for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Miller?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and I'm not going to ask about parking because I'm very much in support of what you're doing, and I thank you for it. I think you're getting well ahead of the curve, and that's a good thing. But I'm curious a little bit, who is the target market for this particular project? Because I'm thinking it might be a little bit different from what some of these other projects are.
Well, it's a combination of people. It's a combination of, we think, there will be ASU professors, there will be people who work in downtown. We are trying to encourage people who want to live the lifestyle, right? Like, there's a bunch of people who live in the lake. There's very many businesses coming from Novus. We think there are a lot of opportunity. I mean, there's not, we have 200 units, so it's not like we need 1 million people. But I think there is a large opportunity, given what you see happening at Novus, given what's happening on the lake, given what ASU is encouraged in terms of research, visiting professors, whomever, who want to live near the university. And the other thing that people who want to live, as you know, when you visit other cities, what they want is amenities, right? They want both high-end amenities, which you see here, you have very high-end kind of hospitality amenities, and they want good food. And that's our plan. Our plan is like the target market that you have in LA when you see these types of buildings, or in Seattle, trying to reach out to those types of restaurants, and that's our market. Those people, the people who are moving from California, and who are moving from Seattle, and who live this lifestyle.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have one. So I like the project. I like the ideas that you're bringing to the table. I'm not super comfortable with them necessarily. And I think, your project on its own doesn't really concern me. Convince me how this doesn't start setting precedent for other projects. I'm a neighbor. I live in the neighborhood to the west. And what I don't want to see is people who live in the towers in downtown area in general have such a lack of parking if this were to spread like wildfire for some reason. And we're cutting back the parking on all new projects. I don't want to see people parking in front of my house, filling up the streets in front of my house, getting their bike out and biking home.
Well, Chairman Johnson, since you and I both live near the campus, I'll say some of that happens already. In my neighborhood, which is not that close, and it's not about parking, right? Like, just about a lot of things that are happening in downtown.
Sure.
But I would say to you, on a totally different level, what Don said. It is changing for people who are younger, like my nieces who are 20. Neither one of them own a car. Like, they take Uber and they get on light rail and they live in this city. They live in North Central Phoenix, where they get on light rail and they get on the bus and they trot themselves wherever they need to go. So I would say that. I mean, I think, to your point, like, there's limited amount of spaces. I mean, this is location based. I don't think that every project can come to you potentially. I mean, as we had this conversation, Commissioner Miller and I had this conversation on Apache. Like, on Apache, where you're closer to neighborhoods, you may need some more parking, maybe you need none. But we need to also think about, from a city, we're investing in a lot of infrastructure. I mean, streetcar costs a lot of money, light rail costs a lot of money, and from just a parking, do I think that as you get closer to, Broadway Mill, where I live, you can have no parking? No, because maybe you will have a different problem, you're closer to neighborhoods. But we also need to think about, like, we're investing all this money. The only way you kind of get people not to take cars is a little bit of a pinch point. By not providing more parking, it's like, hey, you gotta have a little bit of, we're gonna give you options, and we're also gonna give you options that come with alternatives to transportation. So you control whether people get to have parking or not. Right? You get to control some of that. I don't
recommend it.
Okay, well, the city council gets to control some of that. I don't think everything needs no parking, but to a point, I think there's an area around here where you don't have a lot of parking. I mean, and I think that's true. Don was talking about other places, and my sister lives down in Tucson, and she lives in a building, and I don't know, they must have like 12 parking spaces in the downtown at the Herbert. They don't have any parking. I mean, there's not that much parking happening in Tucson. You know, I used to live in DC, there's not that much parking. I mean, it's us that need the car, right? Like, lots of people travel without a car. So I think we're just trying to try. I understand what you're saying. I do think you're gonna get more and more people because there is an affordability component to it and there's a sustainability component to it. Because at some point, those things you have to say, like, if you parking spaces cost a lot of money. And you're buying a lot of parking, and also there's a function of like height. You know, if you don't have 7 stories, then you don't have 26 stories. And so that's another conversation that we can all have. But what we've been able to do, frankly, is we have less parking, we've taken that money, and we invested in the building. We're trying to invest in the retail and on the pedestrian level. And that's the story of this building, because that's what's important to us.
My only other question was, how are you going to keep pigeons off of all those
I don't
ledges?
We'll get Bob back up here, he's gonna talk to you about his pigeons.
Never been a problem?
Well, you know, he doesn't know. We had that problem at 5C, and we have like that squawker thing going off all the time. And we also have all the things. We have that problem. We'll talk about what we're doing. Michelle knows. Michelle knows what we did at 5C to try to deal with these pigeons. Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Tom?
On the restaurant parking, you guys have 8,145 square foot of restaurant, and then you guys are exempting the first 5,000 square foot. Is that to take out the kitchen and storage area?
Yeah, that's the code. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
It allows us.
So you're not modifying that?
No, the restaurant, and no, we're not doing anything to the restaurants. And we have a bunch of parking along the side on 7th Street for the restaurants too.
Perfect.
Yeah. We're trying to make sure people can come to the restaurants. But there is a lot of walking up and down too.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for the presentation.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Okay, what do you want me to do? Oh, so Jacob.
All right, Mr. Payne, time to hear from staff.
Good evening, Commission. For the record, Jacob Payne, Senior Planner, City of Tempe Community Development Department. Oh, thank you. So I'll run through some of the quick facts that the applicant has already shared about the project, and then we can go into some discussion on conditions and talk a little bit more about parking. So this is a request for a new planned area development zoning overlay and a development plan review for the 13-story mixed-use development consisting of 208 dwelling units, 8,381 square feet of commercial space on a little less than half an acre. Here's a look at some of those development standards from the PAD that they're proposing. A residential density of 425 units per acre, building height at 165 feet, and as we know, parking at 42 spaces. This is a look at the site plan. So as they mentioned, there's the street parking spaces along 7th Street, some loading zone parking spaces along College Avenue, an entrance to the garage off of the alley located to the south. A look at the landscaping that's on the ground floor. Along 7th Street, they're having some evergreen elm trees. Along College Avenue, there are some pistache trees there. You'll also notice that the palm trees, the existing date palm trees along College, are being retained, with one of the trees that's located currently in a grate on the sidewalk being moved to a landscape area along the side of the road. This is a look at the elevations. So these two are the street-facing elevations. The east that would be facing College, and the north that would be facing 7th. And then a look at the south elevation, which would be facing the Newman Center, and the west elevation facing the developments on the other side, further down 7th Street. Here's a look at those renderings. And again, the materiality of the building is a brick cladding, some fiber cement paneling as well, and a lot of glazing. So on the topic of parking, this is a breakdown showing the comparison of what code requires versus what's being proposed in this PAD. So as you can see in the zoning code, we do already have a reduced parking standard for projects in the city center zoning district. Those ratios shown in that third column. So about half a space per bedroom for 2, 1, and studio units, and then 0.3 spaces per a 3-bedroom unit, and a waiving of guest parking entirely. What's being proposed is a ratio of 0.094 spaces per bedroom across the board. So as you can see, as that adds up, what the code would require in the city center district is 172 parking spaces. What is being provided is on this PAD is 42. And I just provided for some reference down there at the bottom. Without the already reduction to parking that's 4 projects in the city center zoning, this project located in a different zoning district in the city would require a parking at 539 spaces. So just to give you an idea of how substantial the parking reductions for city center zone projects already is in the city of Tempe, I included that number for comparison. And as we've been kind of talking about, this is a lot more of a reduction of parking than we've ever seen previously in the downtown area. So this is a list of some of the previously entitled projects in the downtown with an idea of the ratio for parking. This is shown in a ratio that's spaces per unit rather than spaces per bedroom. But as you can see, the lowest that we've seen previously in an entitled project was over at 7th and Mill for a project called Hilo. They were providing a ratio of 0.54 spaces per unit. The ratio for this project broken out per unit comes out to about 0.2. So even the lowest parking ratio in the downtown that we've seen previously is over double what is being proposed at this location. So we'll come back to that later when I get to the conditions, but for a planned area development overlay, there is a neighborhood meeting requirement. That neighborhood meeting was held on August 28th, 2023, was attended by one individual who was generally inquiring about the project and its design, questions about the parking, the pricing of the rental units, and scheduling for these hearings here at the DRC and at City Council. Other than that, staff hasn't received any public input on this project. So staff is recommending approval subject to the conditions. The applicant has reviewed these conditions and is in agreement with all except for condition number 4, which they've showed you and we'll talk about right now. So condition number 4 is stating that the developer will provide no less than 80 on-site parking spaces, resulting in an additional below-grade parking level. So based on the information that I'm showing in these tables, and based on the prior iteration of this project that was submitted where they did show that they could do 2 levels of parking, 80 was a number, it was 84 was shown in that submittal. We feel that that's a more appropriate number and it's a middle ground between what they're proposing and even what the city center zoning requires. We're not asking that they meet the minimum requirement of the 0.5 parking spaces per unit, but that they're coming to a more reasonable number that we can comfortably say we've seen before and we know that would be good in the context of the downtown and is compatible. So there's a lot of this discussion about whether or not people will be driving. The thing about residential parking spaces in nature is that cars would be parked for longer durations of time, and a lot of people still do own cars. A big population of people who might not are, of course, students, and we would like to see diversity of housing options in the city of Tempe. So we're feeling that with such a low parking ratio, they might be, excluding other people who might want to live downtown, but they need their car. So like I said, that the 80 spaces comes out to about 0.22 per bedroom, which is pretty on par with the lowest previously approved parking ratio that we've seen. So that is, the ration of staff about adding this condition in here. We obviously feel that the ground floor use is very important, and that's why we want to see if there would be more parking, that it would be located further underground to retain the activation with the street frontage. So moving on from that, condition number 5 for the PED, as we talked about a little bit, just involves having the developer share some information about how this parking is working out. Whether or not condition number 4 remains with the approval, it'll be helpful either way to find out some information just quantifiably about reducing parking in the future so that we can use that information to better inform decisions and reviews as we move on. So some of those things, the number of on-site vehicles that are permitted per unit, the occupancy of the building, whether it's full or half, and then one point about the number of tenants that could be identified on a questionnaire at some point who might own a vehicle but park somewhere else, like maybe in an ASU garage or have a monthly permit in a different facility. Conditions 5 and 6 are relating to the archaeologically sensitive area. So condition number 5 is about having a monitoring and discovery plan, and condition number 6 is about having contractors complete a sensitivity training and test from the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. Condition number 7 is about a disclosure statement or otherwise notification that the property is, near a lot of entertainment venues and that there might be noise in regard to that condition. Number 9 about the loading zones just being paved in concrete as a standard. The existing communications and electrical be located to dry, a new location. Conditions 11, 12, 13, and 14 just have to do with benches, bike racks, tree grates, and waste receptacles, matching those details shown in the Mill and Lake District streetscape principles and guidelines. 38, condition of approval 38 for the DPR, just referring to keeping trees at a safe distance from underground utility lines. And then finally, number 39 on this conditions is about those palm trees existing on College Avenue, retaining the 2 that are already in the landscape bed on the street frontage, and relocating one of the palm trees in a planter from the sidewalk to that landscape bed. So with that, staff's available if you have any questions.
Questions for staff? Commissioner Tom?
Can you go back to the other developments that have reductions? That one there. Has staff had any conversations with either the developers or residents about these reductions, and has there been any impact with these current reductions that we've approved already?
Sorry.
So we have all these cases that have a current reduction in parking, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Has staff had any conversation with the developers or residents about those reductions? Has it been a negative impact to the neighborhood with those reductions that have been previously approved?
No, we haven't had in these conversations. The condition about coming back to us with some information on a yearly basis about how the parking situation is working out is something that we've already employed at another site along Apache, and we feel that that information might be helpful for making the determination into the future as to how this is working for us. But no, there hasn't been any conversations currently about if there's been any nuisance arising from having a lower parking ratio.
Thank you.
Commissioner Redmond?
Thank you. This is great. I'm on. Condition 7. Did City Council invent this? Did you and the planning group invent this? It's pretty unusual to give legal protection to people or whatever this is designed to do. It's not a normal city planning idea.
Yeah, this condition is intended to protect the downtown environment, and what it's intended to be is a vibrant, active community. We expect noise. There's going to be noise indoors or there's going to be noise outdoors, and so we want those prospective tenants to be aware of the environment that they're living in.
Okay.
Careful what you ask for when you live in downtown Tempe.
Anybody else have questions, comments? Okay. I have a couple of them. I just want to say I appreciate staff attempting to find a middle ground for this, middle ground solution for this, and including the condition to collect data. I think that's really important, especially for a project like this. There was a question, I think Commissioner Redmond brought it up, about potential of using, or maybe it was Commissioner Miller, potential of using other parking in other garages that may not be fully utilized. And I'm not suggesting for this project, I'm just asking a more general question. Is there a mechanism that would allow maybe a future development that wants to reduce their parking to show that they have a long-term lease or something like that with some other parking facility that might be utilized strictly for their residents?
Yeah, I can add, we do have allowances for parking management plans to allow sharing of parking. So if another project has excess parking, they can dedicate or allow another project site to transfer some of those parking rights to another facility. Some of it might be just a private agreement between two parties, and whether or not they might have, say, 20 spaces now or 30 spaces in the future. That might be something they might negotiate on a private level that the city doesn't get involved specifically.
But could the city get involved in that as a measure to, free up a few spaces for a development?
Yeah, I think if there was an applicant that wanted to present a project and get another property site on board that was willing to dedicate X number of spaces for that project site, certainly that can be used in their evaluation and justification for reduced parking.
Okay. Commissioner Miller?
Thanks. Sort of following up on that, I know I think at our last joint meeting with the council, a question was raised about the number of parking spaces available in the downtown. And at that meeting, I don't think anybody had an answer, but one was going to be discovered. Has that discovery occurred yet?
I know that DTA does share and have some of those numbers. I want to say somewhere over 9,000 spaces of parking available. But when they're talking about those numbers, they're talking about availability of temporary or guest parking spaces. So spaces that are not encumbered or restricted, like would typically be for residential parking. I think you've got sites, centers that make their parking available to the general public, and there's some parking facilities that are restricted exclusively for their site only and are not available, unfortunately, to the general public.
If I may, as a follow-up to that, and it's useful to know that, but it would also be useful just in terms of the general number, an idea of how many of these not dedicated, not encumbered spaces are actually used on a daily basis. In other words, what's the actual occupancy of this 9,000 or however many actually exist parking spaces? Because if we have a plethora of parking in the downtown area and some of it could actually be utilized on a more, shall we say, permanent basis, then it might be useful to have an idea of that and then make that information available to people as they start their planning process.
Agree, and I think we could also have future meetings with the DTA because they do program or manage some of the influx of the high demand areas where parking's needed and where there might be excess parking available.
Other comments, questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We may call you back up. All right, now is time for our public hearing. Was there anyone here tonight from the public that wished to speak on this project? Okay, seeing none, we will close that since there are no questions to respond to. Okay, commission discussion. Tell me your thoughts. What are we thinking? Commissioner Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll first start out by saying that I like the scope and the quality of the project. So I appreciate that they're using brick and, like the architect mentioned, just kind of integrating more of the character of the university and not just putting up, a lot of the standardized materials that we've been seeing from other projects. So I appreciate that. I also think it's quality and that the parking is going underground rather than having several layers of screen parking versus some of the other projects we've been seeing. I know I've said this before in study sessions, but I think it bears repeating, and Commissioner Miller alluded to it, that in our joint discussion with City Council, we talked about underutilization of parking. And I think if we really want multimodal transportation and we really want to have pedestrian friendly and not put more cars on these smaller arterials, we need to put our money where our mouth is. And I think in this situation, the developer is willing to take that risk. And I'm in support of letting the market speak as to how much parking is required versus mandating a minimum. I do think that there is underutilized parking in the area that can probably be used if there is more demand than can be met in the development's space. I think it's a good toe in the water, and I do think it's the right location to do it. Like Ms. Vaz said, I don't think you should do this in every development, but I do think this particular location can support this type of reduced parking. So that's where my head's at. I would be in support of the project without the condition for the 80 spaces or additional underground level.
Commissioner Tom?
I agree with Commissioner Lloyd. I think this is a perfect location with proximity to light rail, streetcar. We have to start somewhere, right? We have to essentially pull that Band-Aid off, and I think this is a perfect location with the proximity to where it's at. I would support a motion that removed number 4. I'm not a huge fan of the condition number 5. I'm just not a fan of making condition that it's really not enforceable, right? So it's just the applicant's providing us with information, our staff with information, but what does that information do? Or who is privy to that information? I think some of that stuff, some of those developers would like to keep private, potentially a number of occupants, stuff like that, that I'm just not a huge fan of making it part of the public record. And having it, is it really a condition for approval of this development? That's where I stand on 5.
Any others? I'll just jump in. Oh, Commissioner Miller, did you?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll jump in before and hopefully hear a motion or maybe other comments. I am, as I mentioned before, I like the project. I think it's a really nice quality project. Coming into the meeting, I was very comfortable with the middle ground that I think the staff was looking for. Over the course of this meeting, I think it's worth a shot to look at this project on its own and go for a little greater reduction in parking, knowing that our decision is not final and we still have the city council who can check our votes on this. I feel like I would be in support of the project with the removal of item number 4. I would really appreciate keeping condition number 5 in so that the city has some additional tools in the future on future projects. Commissioner Miller.
I would agree with that. I would support a motion that removes the PAD condition number 4. Either keeping or removing condition 5 doesn't cause me a great deal of heartbreak either way. But if it's going to stay in there, I have no problem with it. I think it's a good time that we start doing this. And I think it also can push us and the city to a more proactive position in terms of shared parking and maybe better utilization of the resource that we already have. And I'm also reminded that we've approved a number of quite large buildings with numerous floors of essentially exposed parking above grade. And that the floors of parking do really nothing for a building other than raise the height. So I think this applicant needs to be commended for what they're doing. So I would support a motion for that. And if we need to make one, I'll make it.
Please do.
Okay, in that case, I would vote that we approve the application for its PAD, right? Or do we approve both of them?
Both.
Both, okay. I would recommend that we approve, and I'm trying to get to the number so we can do it. There. I'm almost there. Here we go. Okay, the item number 3, PA action for request for planned area development overlay and development standards and development plan review for the 13-story mixed-use development located at College and 7th. With the removal of the PAD condition number 4, which specifies additional below-grade parking.
Point of clarification, item number 4, you said item number 3, but
Okay,
you're referring to PL 230076.
that is exactly what I'm referring to.
Okay, a motion has been made. Is there a second? Commissioner Redmond?
I'll second it.
Okay.
To do something.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, and that motion passes unanimously. Thank you all for being here tonight. All right. Commission member announcements. Commissioner Forte? No? Nothing? Okay. All right, city staff announcements.
We have no announcements, Mr. Chairman.
No announcements. Okay. All right. Well, with that, thank you all for being here. Thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate your patience at the parking garage, and greatest of luck getting out. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.